privilege of introducing Bill, but many of you will realize that he doesn't need an introduction because he's been around here a very long time. But for those of you who don't know Bill, here's some details about Bill. Okay. Bill grew up in our church, and many of his spiritual life milestones and his years trace back to Owen Sound Alliance. After completing a course in tool and die making at Georgian College in Guelph, it was a member of our church that encouraged him to consider pursuing further studies at Canadian Bible College. There he discovered a passion for youth ministry and graduated in 1990 with the plan to eventually serve as youth pastor. However, during his 4th year at CBC, he also sensed a nudging from the Holy Spirit to apply for a year-long short-term missions opportunity. To his surprise, he was appointed to the Psalm team and made his way to the Philippines. While during student ministry there, he came to the realization that cross-cultural youth ministry could also be an option for him. Bill and Alana were married in 1991 and began preparing to serve as career missionaries with the Alliance, which involved doing home service on the staff at a Canadian church. Bill was hired as an assistant pastor at Redeemer Alliance Church in Orleans, a suburb of Ottawa, and he served there for 3 years before the Lobbezoos were appointed to Cambodia, where they served for 25 years. Most recently, Bill and Alana have moved back to Owen Sound, and they're part of our church family, and we're so blessed to have them and talk about the Leafs and how terrible they are and other things. But Bill, I just want to welcome you up to the stage and thank you for your ministry that you continue on. So we look forward to what God has to say today.
Thanks, Greg. Well, good morning. I had one condition on coming to speak here this morning. I said, I'll come. Thanks, Greg. Oh, there goes my water. Okay, now I got to get this right for the people at home. Is that good there? Am I good on camera? Okay, good. See, John Cook, that's how you do that. John's my friend, I can say that. I said I need the pulpit, not because it makes me feel more pastoral or because it makes me feel a little bit more like Franklin Piles, but because it gives me something to lean on. And at my age, you need a little something to lean on. But it is an honor to be able to be here with you again today. And I've been pondering. It's been a great month, really. The month of the 100-year anniversary. And, you know, we've been, the speakers have, well, up until today, the speakers have been really good. And, you know, I've been to some of the other events. But two words keep coming back to me as I've thought about this church and the 100 years. The first one is legacy. And when you think about the number of people who have been sent out by this church to overseas or even to other cities in Canada, when you think about the people who have stayed here and have ministered and been a witness in their workplace, it's overwhelming. You know, and I love the videos. And apparently, back in the day, you met your spouse at youth group or in Bible college. I guess that's where I met mine as well. So it still happens. But legacy. But the other word that I keep coming back to is community. And the legacy grows out of the community. Because when you sit and when you begin to talk to people and you begin to hear about, you know, your grandmother or your grandfather or your mom or your dad did this. You know, the Pioneer Girls teachers, the Christian Service Brigade leaders, the Sunday school teachers, you know, and the impact that they have had on people as they've grown up. And be honest with you, I think a lot of people won't realize the impact that they have had on others, the impact that they have had on the job of world evangelization. They won't realize that on this side of glory. Not until they get to heaven will they realize the impact that they have had on other people. And that's what I've just been, it's been really cool, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the week. It was also nice to really see how an introduction is supposed to be done. I wish I'd known that before, but it's not easy doing a good introduction. Where is Greg? Where is he, Greg? Did he go home? I stuck around to listen after I did the introduction. Anyway. But the other thing I want to talk about was that the community continues, right? And we continue to produce community stuff like Supper 8, you know, and I think it's great. I don't know if it was planned. It's great that it's happening the same month as the anniversary. You know, people getting to know each other or having coffee in the gym afterwards. I am pretty sure, and I know the church staff have worked hard to improve the coffee. But and it's very good. It's very good. But I'm pretty sure you could put a kettle, an electric kettle and a bottle of instant coffee in there, and we'd still all go in there and drink it. Because it's the fellowship that we go for, which builds the community, which leads to the legacy. Now, I want to speak to you today about the parable of the Good Samaritan. But before I want to read how Jesus got to that story first. And I'm going to read from Luke chapter 10. I'm going to read verses 25 to 29. Please don't look them up. Okay? You can look up your Bible or do all that stuff Ryan says, unlocking and whatnot, in a minute. But please just listen as I pull out my big floppy Bible, and whose pages flip around, who has the big print. I could probably hold it up, and Luke, you could probably read it from there. But I got this. If I stumble, I'll do that. Luke chapter 10, I'm going to start at verse 25. On one occasion, an expert of the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, with all your strength, and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself. So he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" You know, as we celebrate 100 years, and we look back on the missionaries that have come out of this congregation. A few years back, I was speaking on this topic, and I tried to come up with a list of the missionaries who had been sent out by the Owen Sound Alliance Church. And it was a few years ago, so after the service, you'd walk down the middle aisle, and you'd stand there at those back doors, and everybody would come out and tell you that you did a great job, whether it was good or not. They're very gracious that way. But 3 people handed me lists with names on them that I had missed. I had less than half of the missionaries that have come from this place. And so I'm not even going to try to give you a number this morning. But as a church, we have played a big role in the task of world evangelization. And that's pretty amazing when you think about it. Because at first glance, when you look at our church, and when you look at our city, historically, we have not been terribly multicultural. And yet, perhaps it shouldn't be a surprise that as a city and as a church, we are as multicultural and as concerned about completing the Great Commission and going to other countries as we are. You see, Owen Sound was the last stop on the Underground Railroad. We have North America's longest running Emancipation Festival. And of course, the rock band U2 wrote a song about our fair city. And that song is "Where the Streets Have No Name." Now, Joel, if you were to close the service with that, I'd be really impressed. Probably got about 40 minutes if you want to go practice. Now, I'm a delivery guy, so I know some streets have names, but one of them is Alpha, which means first. It's really too bad that First Street and First Avenue and Alpha don't connect, because that would just be a really fun address, wouldn't it? No, I enjoy culture clashes. I do. I enjoy watching people of different cultures come together and misunderstand one another. It's one of the things I really enjoy. There are movies that have done that. Typically, they don't do very well because unless you've lived multiculturally, cross-culturally, you don't really understand what's going on. There's TV shows also, they don't last all that long. I have a few favorites, and if you come talk to me afterwards in coffee, I'll share some of those with you. But for 17 years, we hosted short-term teams in Cambodia. And yes, part of it was to help the ministry and to help raise up the next generation of leaders. But I got to be honest with you, a big part of it is I just wanted to watch North Americans and Cambodians interact. And the chaos that would ensue. There was one guy, he was giving a testimony, and I would always get my students to translate. One, I was too lazy to translate, and two, I just enjoyed watching what would happen. And so this guy was talking about how he used to be really selfish. And that was translated as, he used to sell fish. And then suddenly God didn't want him to sell fish. Well, half the people in the rooms, parents, sell fish. So I had to intervene at that point because that one was going too far. But, I have days and days of stories. Sometimes I just sit in my house and just chuckle to myself. I'll probably do that more and more as time goes on. But today's passage is very multicultural. It's a very multicultural story. But at first read, we probably don't really recognize how multicultural it is. The Good Samaritan. See, the term Good Samaritan is used very widely these days. And I think most of the people who use the term Good Samaritan have no idea what a Samaritan is or really understand the story. It's just become part of culture. Now, in this story, as I read the beginning already, an expert in the law asked Jesus a question. Now, he's not looking for an answer. He's looking to trap Jesus. And Jesus knows this. And, he probably knew it was coming. And so Jesus tells a story. Now, it's important to remember that this is a parable. It is a story. It's not a historical event. But he tells a story that includes a lot of different cultural groups. As I said, we probably don't realize that right away at first glance. But in answering the question of who is my neighbor, Jesus reminds us that God created all cultures. Therefore, all cultures are good. God created all cultures. Therefore, all cultures are good. I'm going to read verse 30. Now you can open your device and it's okay now. I won't send you to the office. I don't think there's anyone in the office. Verse 30. In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell into the hands of robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead." Now, the road from Jerusalem to Jericho was known as the Road of Blood. Now, it was called the Road of Blood because it was a common route between Jerusalem and Jericho, but it went through a lot of uninhabited areas, like desert and places where nobody was living, but a perfect place for bandits to hang out. And they would be there, and they would rob the travelers as they went through. That was kind of their job. They were bandits. So this man in the story who was attacked was probably a business person, a merchant. See, the merchants would travel from one city to the other with product and then they'd sell the product, and they'd get the cash, and they'd buy more product in Jericho, and go back to Jerusalem and sell it, and then take the cash and buy more product, and he would just travel back and forth continuously, always with a lot of product, and always with a lot of cash. Now, the merchants at that time were Sadducees. You see, in Israel, there was a lot of tribal groups, which, in the Bible we're calling them tribes, but they're almost their own nation states. The provinces in Canada isn't enough of a distinction of how different these groups were from one another. They dressed differently. The way they spoke the same language was a bit differently, with a bit of a different accent. And so it wasn't a great deal of unity, really. There was a lot of diversity. And so the Sadducee, the guy asking the question, is a Sadducee. The merchant in the story is a Sadducee. Now remember, this is a parable. Jesus has done this deliberately to tell this guy, to make a point to the person, not only the person asking the question, but everybody listening, because they would have also understood that point. So I said, he's traveling back and forth, always had money, always had product. He runs into the bandits. Now I have a picture of the bandits. You see, my kids grew up in the age of VeggieTales. So every time I hear this story, I think of these guys, the bandits. That's what I live for. It's why I'm a bandit. You don't remember? Come on. Really? No. Some people are getting it. Thank you. Anyway, I don't know if these guys were asparagus or not, but this is the mental picture I always have when I think of the bandits. Now, as I said, we don't know their ethnicity. They might be asparagus. But they would have been considered outcasts in that culture. The bandits were outcasts. They lived in the quiet areas along the road, and they robbed people. It's who they were. It's what they did. It's how they made their living. And there wasn't enough, there wasn't police to go and flush them out. It's just how it was. See, people knew they were out there, but they had to get from Jerusalem to Jericho, or Jericho to Jerusalem. They had to go down the road. They knew the bandits were there. They just would go quickly, or maybe not have a lot with them, or just hope they made it through. That was kind of the deal. That was kind of the life. When Alana and I, and Holly, who is one at the time, first arrived in Cambodia, there was a road from the capital city of Phnom Penh to the beach town where missionaries would go for vacation. But on this road were bandits. They were military guys, or just guys who got their hands on some guns. And basically they would stop traffic, and they would make you pay something so that you could continue on. Or sometimes, if they're a little meaner, they would take all your stuff. But that was the way to the beach. And so oftentimes we would travel in convoy, 5 or 6 vehicles, and we would go really fast. And I'm sorry, if you broke down on the side of the road, we weren't stopping for you because it could be a ruse, and there could be some bandits there. But we had to go. That was the way to go, and so you made the best of it. And they're doing the same thing here. Now, we don't know the bandits now, which leads me to the next point, which is different ethnicities. You see, we don't know the bandits' ethnicity, but we know that they're different from the traveler. How do we know that? How do I know that the bandits aren't also Sadducees? Because of what they do to him. See, they didn't just rob him, but they stripped him and they beat him. This was personal. They stripped him of his clothes. I told you earlier that different tribal groups, different people groups within Israel dressed differently. And so by stripping him of his clothes, they were stripping him of his cultural identity, which was a huge deal. They could have just taken the money and taken the product, But they humiliated him. It was personal. As I said, we in Cambodia, we did 18 years of I might have said 17 a minute ago. I added a year of short-term ministry. And I told you about the shellfish, but there's also something else that I love to watch happen. Because North Americans, at least the generation of North Americans that we had coming on short-term trips, were huggers. Cambodians are not huggers. See, when someone would come to greet each other, they go like this, depending on how important they are as to how high you hold the hands, right? But these North Americans arrive, and I'm introducing people, and the North Americans are coming in for the hug, right? And the Cambodians are like, a lot of side hugs happening. And I try to tell in the orientation, they don't hug. And, oh, I can't help it, I got to hug. And, Anyway, it was a lot of fun. But different cultures operate and think differently. And we all have our own way of dressing. We all have our own way of talking. If you travel around Canada even, you go east and you try to understand what some people are saying. Now, I don't mean east. I don't mean like Markdale, which is hard enough. But I mean like the Maritimes, or go to Newfoundland and have a chat. Nobody from Newfoundland here today, right? No. I'm not saying anything about Americans today. So, where is he? There he is. See? Anyway, so anyway, in the story here, this poor Sadducee is beaten, he's naked, he's almost dead, he's laying on the side of the road, which leads us to the second point, and that is ignored. Verses 31 and 32. A priest happened to be going down the same road when he saw the man, and he passed by on the other side. I'll just stop at 31 for now. See, now priests are another group. See, the priests were from the tribe of Aaron. And so again, different culture, different dress, different way of talking, different people. Priests also, though, had to keep themselves pure. And so a priest could not come in contact with anything dead. And you look at this guy on the side of the road, and you're probably pretty much thinking, it says he's half dead, so he probably looks dead. But not only did the priest ignore him, he crossed to the other side of the road, really not wanting to get too close to the death, I guess. Now, remember before COVID, when you'd walk down the sidewalk, and somebody would come the other way, and you'd walk within inches of them? And nobody freaked out? Do you remember that? That was fun. Oh, wait. Right? Now, if I'm walking down the sidewalk, someone's coming the other way, one of us is hitting the grass or the road. Right? We can't, even though, COVID's over, we don't come that close to each other anymore. But we don't cross the road. Although one time I was walking downtown, and the person coming the other way suddenly crossed to the other side of the street. I thought, okay, well, maybe they have business on that side of the street or something. But once they were past me, they crossed back over to my side. And I stopped and I looked. Well, they didn't look back. They would have seen me going like this. But that's what the priest did. He crossed to the other side of the road and probably crossed back after he got past. Then there's the Levite. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. Now, Levites, of course, are from the tribe of Levi. Now, those in the tribe of Levi were known to wear denim. Thank you. You didn't get it, denim, Levi jeans, denim. So here he comes, jeans, denim shirt, vest, and jacket, probably the whole deal, maybe a denim hat, because he's from the tribe of Levi. But the Levites were known as important civil servants. You know, it's interesting, if you look at the ancient world, different people groups were known for different things. And that's typically what they did for a living, was what their people group was known for. We don't seem to like to do that anymore, but it was kind of a thing back then. If you were this group, this is what you did. This was the job you had. But as I said before, they were all different cultures. They ate differently. They spoke differently. But it's still today, I think you can tell something about a culture by listening to its language, right? Canadians were sorry a lot, and we're very polite, and oh, thank you, and yeah, all that. Aussies just really have a good time. If you want to have a good time, sit down and talk with an Australian for a while, if you can understand what they're saying. Some other languages come across a little more serious and stern, and so that might say something about their culture. But the Levite was very important. He was very busy. He didn't have time. He was probably off to do some important administrative task. He didn't have time to see to the dead guy on the side of the road. And so he also crosses to the other side, and he keeps on going. Now, which leads us to the next point, which is prejudice. See, both of these people had excuses for not helping, and we've all done it. We all have excuses for not helping, for not doing, for not getting involved. But when it comes right down to it, it's really just prejudice. See, I believe all of us have cultural blind spots. We all have people that we're not terribly comfortable with. I was in Cambodia, as I said. I've said this a number of times. I guess I'm really proud of it. I was in Cambodia for 25 years, if you didn't know. Every country in Southeast Asia has another country in Southeast Asia that they don't like. That's because they all occupied one another at war at one time or another. So the Cambodians really don't like the Vietnamese, and the Vietnamese don't like the Thais. The Thais don't like the Malaysians. Nobody likes the Lao. I'm not sure why. They seem like nice enough people. I've been there. Everybody loves the Filipinos because they got really good food and they're a little far away, so that nobody ever... But I've been there a few times, and I know the Filipinos aren't real big on the Spanish conquests and all that. So within our human nature, we all have this blind spot. And I believe we need to fight against it every day and actively work against it. As Canadians, we can say, oh, we like everybody. No, not really. Whoever beats us at hockey, we're not going to like them. We're okay with the Americans now, because they haven't beaten us in a little while. Swedes, not so much. Nobody from Sweden here? Right? Good. Took a shot. That was okay. But we need to all recognize our blind spots. And we all need to purposely do the exact opposite of what our human nature might be telling us to do in reaching out and in loving people. Which brings us to the third point, which is helped. Verses 33 to 35. You think the big print Bible would be bigger. Anyway, there we go. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was. And when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and he bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. So, the Samaritan comes along, and the Samaritan stops and he helps. It says he took pity on him. But the fact that he stopped at all is remarkable, because Samaritans were of mixed ethnicity. They were part Jew, part Gentile, and it's interesting that in the Bible, Gentile really means not Jew. So anyway, part Jew, part Gentile, not accepted by either community. And so they were their own community. They had all these different tribal groups that are going on, all these different ethnicities. None of them liked the Samaritans. People wouldn't even walk through Samaria. They would go around. But it's the Samaritan. It's the Samaritan who stops and bandages up the wounds and takes him to the inn. Which brings us to the next point, which is the innkeeper. Now, you need to recognize the kind of an inn we're talking about here. This is not like the one Mary and Joseph stayed in Bethlehem. That kind of an inn, the word used there is probably better translated for us in these days as an Airbnb. So basically, Mary and Joseph couldn't find an Airbnb. This is an inn that the Romans built along the highways that they built. So if you're traveling along, there would be it's like an ancient en route with lodging. Now, if you're looking for an ancient en route, the one on the 400's been there a long time, but that's an aside. An ancient en route, and they would go, and these were usually run by Romans. So the Romans came, they conquered, they built the roads, they built the inns, they brought their people in to run the inn. So they're probably charging to use the road, they're charging you to use the inn. And the innkeeper would have been making money. Now, the innkeeper was, I said, Roman, living in Israel, probably not out of the goodness of his heart. He probably wasn't a tent maker. He wasn't there to hold the Bible study while he ran his inn. No, he was there to make money. That's why he was there. But the inns were open to all people. Jews, Gentiles, Samaritans, Romans. And the innkeeper took care of the wounded man after the Samaritan left. He didn't need to do that. Think about it. As soon as the Samaritan's donkey was gone, he could have tossed that guy out onto the street, kept the money, and when the Samaritan came back, said, oh yeah, he died. Sorry, he passed away not long after you left. Right? If the innkeeper is there to make money, there's no reason why he wouldn't do that, except that he was a good person. The innkeeper is as much a hero in this story as the Samaritan. And yet we don't go around calling people good innkeepers, do we? That's kind of a different thing. There's an award for that. I think the Comfort Inn has won it a couple of times. But the innkeeper took care of him out of the compassion of his heart. So it's interesting. It's interesting in this story that the two people who show compassion are the least Jewish people of all. They are the people from groups that the Jews quite literally despised. Now, this is a parable. It's a made-up story. Jesus knew that everybody listening would understand all of the different cultural groups that were involved in this story. He chose them specifically for a reason so that they would hear it and that they would know. And so each one of them would kind of understand that he was talking to them. Which brings us back to the question that started it all. Who is your neighbor? Everyone in need that you show love and compassion and mercy to. God created all cultures. Therefore, all cultures are good. This is something that the predecessors of this church believed and understood. And we have invested a lot of financial and human resources into the task of world evangelization. And I believe we can be proud of that. You know, a kind of a Christian proud, not that bad proud, but thankful. There's the good. We can be thankful for that. It's a 100-year anniversary. And it is time to look back, but it's also a time to look ahead. You see, our world is changing. Our region is changing. Our city is changing. The world is indeed coming to us. If you don't believe that, drive down Highway 10 towards Toronto. Every community is growing and growing and growing. Now, when I say the world is coming to us, I mean Toronto's coming to us. But a lot of people are coming this way. Therefore, we all need to begin to think like missionaries. Now, as a retired missionary, I'm not quite ready to say we're all missionaries. I'm not going to say that. You know you're a missionary when you had to renew your passport before it expired because you ran out of pages. You know you're a missionary when you have a tropical disease living dormant in one of the organs of your body. You know you're a missionary when you have at least 3 countries' currency in your wallet. Now, for the younger generation, currency means cash, and cash is this paper stuff that we used to use instead of an e-transfer. It's kind of an e-transfer, but in person. But we need to think like missionaries. See, there's a fancy missions word, and it's called enculturation. And what that means is you need to look at a culture. You need to look and you need to keep the things that are good about that culture. And you need to come up with better alternatives for the things that maybe could use changing. Which means we need to think through and know what we believe on certain issues. There are issues coming to us that we have never really had to contemplate before, but will be coming to the forefront as our world changes, as our county changes, as our city changes, as our church changes. We need to think about things like gender identity, like sanctity of life at the beginning or at the end, of immigration. And we need to know what we personally believe on each one of those things. Not what we have been told we're supposed to believe, not what we have historically believed, but we need to get into the Word and we need to understand what the Word is saying about these different things because they are going to become more and more prominent. And we need to find out what is the predominant culture of those people who are arriving new in our community? And what does that culture believe? And what are the issues that they are dealing with? You see, I believe that one of the best ways to understand a culture is to understand its language. And so I do some delivery. As I've told you before, I do some food delivery. Now, there is a people group that is predominantly involved in that business. And I'm not part of that people group. And so I've decided that I'm going to learn the language of that people group so that when we're all hanging out in that little room at McDonald's, I can understand what they're saying and I can talk to them. Now, when I say I'm going to learn that language, it means I've downloaded the app on my phone. But it's a start. Worship team, you can begin to come forward. See, as the demographics of our city change, so must our church. See, the people in here need to become more of a reflection of the people out there. And the people up here on the platform need to be a reflection of the people in the pews. We need to adapt while remaining true to our calling of sharing the gospel with the nations. That's not going to be easy. I don't like change. I've eaten the same lunch for 30 years. It's good. It's a bologna sandwich and it's a ham sandwich, and they're good. It won't be easy, but I know that we can do it. I know that we will adapt because, you see, we're Owen Sounders, and that's what we do. I invite you to pray with me. Lord, thanks. Thank you for 100 years. Thank you for the opportunity to celebrate. Thank you for the way that you have used this community, the way you have worked in us and through us to go to so many parts of the world. We thank you that the world's coming here, and we pray that you would help us to be ready for that and to welcome it and to be able to I look forward to the 200-year anniversary and all the different people groups that we're going to have in here. And we pray all these things in your name. Amen.